Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third annual World Mental Health Day event. My name is Tina Yip, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Culture at Burlington Cameron. This year has been a whirlwind roller coaster for all of us, whether it is the global pandemic or dealing with the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many more. And on top of that, we have the elections coming up. We are all collectively navigating a range of different traumas. Mental health has been a really important topic for myself personally and also at Burlington Cameron. And this year, this year especially, the line between work and home have rapidly been blurred. And I believe that as we continue on into the future of work, it will continue to integrate. So it is very important for us to take time to have these conversations like these ones today, to listen, to reflect, to understand ourselves and also others, especially those in the BIPOC community, LGBTQ+, anyone who is different from ourselves. And as employers, encourage our employees to do the same. At Burlington Cameron, we have established Mindful Fridays from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. We encourage our employees to dedicate time for themselves, to change up their morning routine, to meditate, journal, drink coffee in silence, whatever it is that you need. And we do acknowledge that in order to improve your mental well-being doesn't just happen in that 1 hour, but it is a reminder for us to at least take care of ourselves in that dedicated period of time so that we can better show up for our work, for our clients, and most importantly, for ourselves. And this year, we are very excited to be partnering once again with Made of Millions for this initiative. And so I would love to invite and welcome Aaron Harvey, who is the co-founder of Made of Millions, up here for a few words.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. Appreciate the team at Made of Millions, Burlington Cameron, Wethos, and all these amazing panelists for putting this together today. It's going to be an amazing opportunity to hear lived experience and really good professional perspectives. Yeah, as Tina mentioned last year, we talked a little bit about our Dear Manager campaign, and what started off as just a really DIY campaign had turned into a really amazing movement in the agency and corporate space. So this year, we're really excited to announce the launch of Made Academy. It is a stigma-fighting, empathy-building, radically inclusive mental health curriculum that we're bringing to the workforce. This is really about empowering the individual versus just equipping the organization with information. This is really about using education to democratize everyone's access to better understand and navigate their mental health care. Also, if you go to madeacademy.io and sign up for early access, you'll get the brand new edition of Beautiful Brains, which is our mental health manual you can bring right into your workforce or send over to your HR. So thanks to everyone. Really appreciate this and a continuation of this effort and this movement. There's some amazing panelists. So thank you for joining. And with that, I'll kick it back to Tina.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. We also want to give a shout out to our third partner, Wethos, the first digital platform built for creative freelancers to take care of their projects. Check them out at wethos.com. So before we jump into our discussion, we would like to invite Elisa Schenkel from Heal House for a grounding moment. Heal House is an inclusive and accessible wellness space that centers BIPOC in Brooklyn. They also work with companies to do mental health workshops, so definitely check them out. So here is Elisa.
Thank you, Tina, for that beautiful intro. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. Firstly, to be on the panel, and also just that I got this option to be able to ground you guys before we go into this conversation. This stuff is tough stuff. It's hard to be vulnerable. So I say always give yourself a pat on the back for showing up even for this conversation. So let's take a moment to just check in with self, and we're going to do a quick breath exercise to get you guys grounded in your space. If you have some sage, feel free to grab some sage. Have some tea, get cozy, feel comfortable. I'm actually in meditation pose right now in my meditation room, so I'm happy to be here. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna do a quick check-in. You're gonna put your right hand on your heart and your left hand on your abdomen. And maybe close your eyes down a little bit and just tap into, what does my body need? What does my mind need right now? What does my spirit need? Feel into that. Breathe. And if you need to feel grounded, I'm just going to ask you to take your hands and put them face down on your knees, whether you're in sitting position or you're on the floor, the couch, chair, it doesn't really matter. And if you feel like you need some energy today, I'm going to ask you to put your hands up. So just to kind of receive. So choose what feels good. And then we're going to do a quick breath exercise that is called the 4-7-8 breath exercise. And it's really great to kind of just bring in what you need, but really specifically ground yourself and deal with any anxiety, stress. It'll just kind of bring you back to square zero. So what we're going to do is you're just going to follow me for 3 breaths. We're going to inhale for 4. We're going to hold at the top for 7. And then we're going to breathe out for 8. And we're going to do this 3 times. So, all right, we're going to start right now. So you're going to breathe in for 4. We're going to hold at the top for 7. And release for 8. We're going to breathe in for 4. Hold at the top for 7. And release for 8. We're going to breathe in for 4. Hold at the top for 7. And release for 8. So just take a moment to settle into that space and receive what you called in. And just observe what you want to receive from today's panel, what questions you may have for yourself, what maybe you might be struggling with, or what's even beautiful or that you have gratitude for. And just open your eyes and yes, I'm looking forward to be in this space with you guys and to have this conversation with all these wonderful panelists so we can just break into it.
Thanks, Elisa. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Clermont. I am the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Vox Media, and I have the honor and the privilege to grounding moment. Elisa, I appreciate that because I feel like I needed that and I need this conversation today. You know, in the past couple of days and months, I feel like I've been a bit tired, and I'm sure as those of you in the audience maybe not feel as inspired to create or to work or, you know, even know what to do in terms of just taking care of yourself or others as we think about this pandemic and also this racial uprising. And I've just been thinking a lot about collective care and healing and sometimes wanting to escape. A lot of times wanting to escape, and also just thinking about what is that willpower? What is the willpower that is allowing me to get up every day, find some sense of gratitude, find some sense of grounding, and what does that look like? Not only just for myself personally, but also I think for others, and also when I go into a workplace. And in some cases, some of y'all, your home is now your workplace. And so what is that willpower to figure out what this means for you? And, you know, it's not lost on me as well that I just thinking about that breathing exercise, and as I was holding it for those 7 counts, I thought about a lot of folks. I thought about colleagues that have been rallying around and crowdsourcing money on various apps to donate to things like the Black Lives Matter movement. I've been thinking about parents and caretakers now in the sense of handling childcare, and some of y'all may be doing that right now as you're trying to attend this session. I'm thinking about late night calls and FaceTimes. I'm thinking about crying. I've actually been self-isolating alone with myself and my dog. I've been thinking about a lot of things, and I think what I hope y'all as audience members and even as our panelists, the goal I hope is to connect to mental health in an ownable way, not only for just for yourself and your own well-being, but I think for us, we all need to find some collective action. And I do think even just showing up to this very moment is a response and a call and a way to act, not only for yourself, but for others, and in some cases for your own workplaces and communities. I want to quickly just thank the panelists. I want to thank all y'all attendees as well. Berlin Cameron, Made of Millions, and Wethos for gathering us here today. And as I think about us gathering, I just want you to know that there is a chat room. Feel free to type in comments and questions or cheer each other on as we have our conversations and express ourselves and be very vulnerable in this time. I also want to make sure that we are all just being respectful too. Please don't condemn anyone's experiences or thoughts as they are being reflected in the chat channel. I think it's the sense of vulnerability is very brave, and for anyone that's feeling the experiences right now, a lot of this is still challenging for many of us. I think in some cases we haven't maybe even thought about our own mental health until now, and so just be mindful and respectful of that. And then with that, I'll just kick it off with our panelists. They're going to do introductions. So I just like each panelist to just tell me a little bit about yourself, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and think about how you have been taking care of yourself in the last 48 hours. This morning I got up at 6, and one of the things that I do is I move. And so I did a 45-minute workout. I have my dumbbells and yoga mat behind me, and I really do need to move to really make myself feel a bit grounded and to be energized for the day. And I definitely had my palms up because I wanted that energy, and I still need that energy. So with that, let's start with Dr. Brittany Linton. Can you tell us about yourself and how have you been taking care of yourself in the last 48 hours?
Sure, happy to. Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon on the East Coast. My name is Dr. Brittany Linton, and I work for the Veterans Affairs out of San Francisco, where I'm a clinical health psychologist. I have had the great opportunity to work with a number of people around how do they happen to cultivate their well-being in the workplace and really help prevent burnout, particularly for healthcare workers and our frontline responders. So I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation today. How I've had the chance to help invest in my own self-care and prevent burnout in the last 48 hours is I've been digging deep into conversations with friends and family members I haven't connected with in a while. So when I noticed for myself that 2 months had elapsed since I talked to some of my closest friends, I said, nuh-uh, and I started sending out a flurry of text messages last night to 12 different people. So that's been my self-care in the last 48 hours.
Thank you. Elisa.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Hey guys, it's so wonderful to be here, especially to have a familiar face, Chris, and to meet you guys. I'm the co-founder of Heal House. My name is Elisa. We started Heal House to create a more accessible, inclusive, and diverse wellness experience because we found it to be something missing in the industry. And we have a physical space in Brooklyn, and we do workshops, daily yoga classes, meditation, private sessions, and workplace wellness, and moved everything online. So we're virtual right now, and it's a pleasure to be having this conversation because we have a big focus on mental health and removing stigma and normalizing these very human experiences we all deal with. There shouldn't be stigma attached to this. This is life. It's ebbs and flows. We don't have it all together. So I'm always excited to have these conversations and to bring what I can bring to the table.
Thank you. And we will definitely get into a lot of conversation around the stigma.
I totally forgot about the 48 hours.
Yeah.
Yes, so the last 48 hours, the biggest thing that comes to mind today is kind of reprogramming what your reactions are or what you think your reality is. I think it's easy for us to have experiences and we just get caught up in that moment. So I've actually been taking it back and mindfully saying to myself, okay, but what is actually the reality of this situation? And I'm actually okay. And I have gratitude for this, that, and the third. So recreating your reality despite, what happened or what your experience is, that's really been super beneficial for me in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, I've been doing that, particularly after watching the latest vice presidential debate, in some regards. Simon, hi, how are you? Please introduce yourself and how have you been taking care of yourself in the last 48 hours?
Great. Hi, Chris, and hi, thanks to Bill and Cameron and everyone for putting this together. And I'm thrilled to be part of this panel. So my name's Simon Fenwick. I'm the Executive Vice President of Talent, Equity and Inclusion for the 4As, the American Association of Advertising Agencies. And I lead the 4As Foundation, which is the 501c3 nonprofit of the 4As, which incorporates our multicultural advertising intern program, scholarships, the work we do with high schools, and work we're doing now in the BIPOC community, but particularly with Black African-American employees to elevate their and amplify their voices in the industry. So what have I done in the last 48 hours? I've turned the news off. That's the first thing that I've done because I was finding it was just depressing me too much. I picked up a book, which I haven't done for a while. I'm an avid reader, and I found that over the last couple of months, I haven't had time to just like turn all my electronics off and read. And I find that very soothing. And probably like you, Chris, if I have to get out of the house first thing in the morning and I have to get out for 45 minutes or an hour, and I either go for a run, it's more like a walk, but I go for a walk, I make sure I go down to the Hudson and walk along the water and, you know, just switch off from everything. And then I come back to the apartment. I'm like you, I've been isolating alone, which has been challenging. And you just feel refreshed, and I feel like I can, you know, take on the day and everything that's going on in the world.
Thank you. And Suba, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So lovely to be here. First, let me just say how humble I am to be on this virtual stage with this incredible folks. And a huge thank you to Berlin Cameron for the invitation. So my name is Suba Nadaraja, Executive Director of DE&I at VML-Y&R. And when I'm not co-leading DE&I at VML-Y&R, I'm a closet architect who designed my home. I'm an animal lover. I'm an aspiring equestrian. I'm a world traveler. Who is constantly seeking, exploring, and a lover of all things art and design. And on an emotional and spiritual side, living consciously has become the bedrock of my life. And what I do at VML-Y&R, so my role is to lead and develop implementations of effective strategy to build and ensure a vibrant culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion, one that actually increases cultural literacy, pushes awareness and acceptance across our agency. And what have I been doing? How have I taken care of myself in the last 48 hours is something that I do actually every day. It's and I have to consciously remind myself is to incorporate or introduce silence into my day. Because our world, my day, I don't know about you guys, and I'm sure it's pretty much the same, is filled with chatter. And it's a different kind of chatter that all of us are in right now. So it really mindfully telling myself that I need to incorporate silence, whether it is walking, meditation, journaling, reading, but just making sure that that silence is thinking about it as a transformation of life, one breath at a time.
Yes, yeah. I have been owning that a lot too, especially as someone who oftentimes leans too much on being an extrovert and being around so many people. I think one of the things that I've actually learned a lot about myself is enjoying the isolation and also enjoying that silence too. So audience, I hope y'all are excited. We're about to dive into a continuous dialogue that I honestly don't think ends just in this session. It will continue going beyond us and hopefully into other rooms and spaces and including Zooms. But one of the things that I thought was on my mind, particularly going on recently, is just, you know, tomorrow is World Mental Health Day. And also it's not lost on me as a person of color and also a queer person of color, that National Coming Out Day is also on Sunday. And so it's been not lost on the fact that there was a point in time, particularly with the American Psychiatric Association, that mental health illness was, particularly homosexuality, was deemed as a mental health illness. The medical establishment viewed gay, lesbians, and other people from the LGBTQ plus community as disease or needing a cure. Business and government, obviously, you know, based on those thoughts and those archetypes and those stories and words, added onto that weight and used mental illness as a classification, and in some aspects were using it as a means to justify discrimination and oppression and bigotry. And for a long time, you know, particularly for the gay community, we were seen as sick, and it was very hard to see any type of progress and any equality. And then, 1973, there was this momentous occasion in which, those civil rights pioneers really fought to change and make sure that it was removed. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about just in the context of what's been going on lately, particularly mental health being deemed an illness, or the word illness a lot, and just also the challenges that we face in terms of the workplace and how we use words and describe things. But I would like to ask the panelists particularly, how has mental health evolved over the years, as I think about how not only the civil rights movement has moved and evolved over the years, and also civil rights, and particularly for the LGBTQ plus population. And so I would like to start with Dr. Brittany Linton. How have you seen mental health evolve over the years, and particularly when things like a manual with words that say this is an illness is used as a tool of oppression?
That's a great place to start. So one of the very first things I do when I lecture or talk or bring in new psychology graduate students is I chat about how, as pivotal as it is that our diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM, is the cornerstone of all that we do for psychological care and mental health care delivery, in and itself is a historical tool of oppression. And so when we want to talk about mental health access, mental health equity, mental health promotion and well-being, and culturally competent care, we need to recognize that the very tools that we utilize to begin with are problematic tools. And I always share with people that mental health is what you make of it. It's your lived experience. It is also your societal experience. It is what we have decided upon as a culture and as a community, what is most resilient, redundant, and most normal that we have all decided makes our society operate most successfully. But what's nice is that as we begin to shift those definitions, as we begin to have more conversations and voices contributing to what mental health looks like, we have the opportunity to really open up the lens, open up the spectrum, and better understand that mental health takes so many different shapes and forms, and mental well-being and mental resiliency takes all of these different avenues. And so what I'm really excited about as we see more BIPOC community members, such as myself, I also identify as a queer BIPOC community member, as more individuals who look like myself, or more individuals that look like each of you, enter the sphere of mental health care access and mental health care delivery, we get to reshape the narrative. And so I'm so excited that we are having things and events like Mental Health Awareness Day, because those types of experiences never existed before. Similarly, workplaces historically have not talked about mental health and well-being in a really robust, profound way that helps support their employees, and especially all employees that come from various marginalized communities. And the fact that industries such as Burlington and Made of Millions are putting on this type of event shows that we are talking about it in a far more formative way, in a newer way, in a way that many more of us can enter the conversation successfully and talk about our own mental health care experience. And I could go on and on, so I'm going to pause myself there. I'm going to pause myself there.
No, we needed that origin story, right? I mean, I think part of this is to say many of the challenges around our ability to move in and out of these conversations and to even understand what this all means for ourselves. It's also knowing the history, right? I always say, Vox Media, we deal with words and storytelling, but Maya Angelou used to have this phrase in the Genesis: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And take whatever your sense of what God may mean, a sense of higher power, belief, a hierarchy, a way in which you find some sort of canon for what moves you. We're born and then we're given labels. We're given a gender identity expression, we're given a race and ethnicity, we're given a citizenship, and all of that starts to shape everything before we even speak, before we even are able to decide who I am and what we are. And so it's interesting to think about being born now and the privilege of being able to say, wow, I'm glad I wasn't born in the 70s when I would have been deemed as, a disease and something that needed a cure. And I think to some degrees right now, the evolution about mental health and it not necessarily being seen as an illness. And I think in the workplace, it's an interesting space to think about. And so, Simon, I would like, and Suba as well, the conversation about where's the evolution or where has been mental health involving in the workplace, specifically as y'all deal and live in the world of people operations and managing and maintaining a company's culture. What was happening before we've all started to implement many of the current benefits around mental health?
Well, before I even get to the answer, I just wanted to say, Dr. Brittany, thank you for saying the magic word, which is basically reshaping, because we really cannot go into the forefronts of this conversation without actually talking about where we were before and kind of like rethinking and reshaping the conversation. So the global health scare is quite challenging, as we all know right now. And that sense of that belonging is so integral, right, in terms of emotional well-being, physical well-being, mental well-being, and most of us are wrestling with that. And most of our employees and co-workers are wrestling on how to cope with the uncertainties from day to day, from minute to minute. I know I'm coping with it literally from minute to minute. What's happening right now in this country, this world, is just something that we have never lived through, or at least in this generation. So we're living through the racial pandemic, and we understand we're also living through a global pandemic, and you've heard this terminology, living through a pandemic within the pandemic. And the truth of the matter is really recognizing that it is difficult, and really recognizing and being empathetic and listening basically to our employees on the struggles that they're going through and the emotion levels that they are in. And I love to use this word listen, and I'm going to say as much as possible, listen, and listen, but listen with your heart. Because when you listen with your heart is when you actually can learn how to unlearn certain things and be prepared to pivot and be prepared to be open and move towards a different direction of the programs that we've had or have in your organizations, and learn how to collaborate and invite others along with this journey. I think something that we are doing at VML is really opening that sense of purpose and creating the sustainable change by actually inviting people into the conversation. Otherwise, it's going to be single-minded, and it'll probably just be a group of people that assume that this is right for you when it's actually not right, because it's what we think is right, but we need to ask you what you think is right for yourself. So that's a couple of things that I would encourage all of us to actually listen and to collaborate.
Yeah, that's great. Simon, what have you been seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, I would fully support everything that Sue is saying, and I do have to say that I've had the privilege of listening to Dr. Linton a few times, and I'm always blown away with what she has to say. So following her is very, very difficult. So I'm not going to sound nearly as smart, so just bear with me. Look, I think in the workplace, one of the things that I think we're finding now is, we're living in unprecedented times, and I think we need to start thinking about mental health the same as we think about racial injustice. And, until we break down systemic racism in the workplace, we're going to still struggle with the open conversations around mental health, because it's not unknown that mental health affects marginalized communities far greater than it does the white population. And it is starting to affect the white population in larger numbers, and that's why we're having the conversation. But even when we think of it in those terms, we've had to wait for the dominant population to suddenly start suffering the problem to have the conversation. And so I think as organizations, I think we need to be open and honest. I think we need to train our leaders to be willing to have those conversations, and we need to take the stigma out of their preconceived ideas around what efficiency and what the work looks like. So me personally, I was diagnosed OCD when I was quite young. I've been on medication most of my life to deal with that. I'm very open in every job opportunity that I go into, and I talk about it in the second or third interview. And my philosophy in that is, I'm old, so I can get away with it a little bit more. But my philosophy is, if the organization doesn't understand that I have that illness, and I don't explain how it can show up, then they're going to have preconceived ideas that when, you know, my work might look like it's suffering, they won't understand why. Or they may not understand why I'm asking the questions I'm asking. And so I think it's really important that we educate ourselves, that we educate our leaders, but more importantly, you know, I think this year has really proven to us that until we break down the systemic racism within the workplace and we bring equity and fairness to the workplace and belonging, and a few people have talked about belonging, you know, I have to say, I still think we're going to be challenged with it. And, you know, I look at particularly diversity, equity, and inclusion people now you know, they are the facilitators of the conversation. But diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I say belonging now, belongs with everyone. And so we all have to, you know, everyone in the organization has to take some accountability and create a space and a pathway for people to feel safe.
Thank you. I know, at least for me, when I think about the history of where this has been, I mean, there were moments when, you know, people are so out about their identities now in a way that you would have never seen it before. And I also think in terms, you know, about what we do at Vox Media and the ways that we're providing opportunities for that. We've done wellness weeks. We've actually little disclosure, Elisa and I are working together right now because we partnered with Heal House to offer, and Simon, you actually rightly point this out, realizing the nuance and the need to provide equitable access in all forms, in terms of practitioners, in terms of modalities, for all of our employees. And that was one of the main reasons we were also looking to partner with Heal House, particularly for our Black employees. Elisa, I would like you to speak about this in a way, in the sense that you have your own business, you know, co-founded, and, you know, self-care and wellness has been, you know, buzzword for a while, but I wanted you to maybe speak about where mental health is today and where it might go in terms of trends, and particularly what made you establish Heal House.
Yeah, I mean, what I see happening right now, and thank you guys, everyone, for their answers. It's really amazing to hear from you guys. It's interesting. I think people are finding out that you have to have vulnerability to get to the healing. You can't actually separate the two, which has been the huge issue, because it's like, you're not allowed to talk about it. We can't talk about it. I can't bring it to my manager. You know, there was never this notion of I can tell my boss I suffer from depression, I suffer from anxiety, because what's going to happen is, you know, then you're going to be stigmatized, or someone may not believe that you're going to show up a certain way. And I think it's so beautiful for Simon that testimony of doing that is it's such a game changer, because that should be able to happen, right? You should be able to come forth as your full self without feeling like it's a deficiency. Because we're going to talk about mental health, it's not looking at these things like it's a deficiency. It's understanding that, you know, that we don't all function at this one linear path, and that we have to meet people where they are, right? And in order to get there, we have to be honest and open about it. So I'm a strong believer in even within making Heal House, is that I often say vulnerability is sexy. Let's create that narrative, because it is. It's like, when you can show up as your true self, that feels good. And we should be able to push that narrative as being okay. And so at Heal House, we do have a lot of focus around mental health and vulnerability and healing, and why I created, you know, these things like healthy conversation, because it allows people to be in an open forum space to be like, me too. And when you give people that space to know that people are having shared experiences, just like Simon shared, that allows me to be like, hey, I actually struggle with this as well. So I do see that shift starting to happen, that companies, people in general, are saying, yeah, we have to actually address this in a very open, transparent way, right?
Yeah. And
then also understanding that mental health has a root cause. You know, this just didn't pop up and I have some sort of, you know, disorder. It's like, no, something happened for me to get there. There's a root cause, there's a trauma, there's something I'm experiencing. And also understanding that that spectrum, it flows, right? It changes, It evolves. It's not, you know, it's also about self-awareness. What's the work that you're putting in? What are you doing about it? So it's also, it's a personal journey, right? And it's understanding and finding what are the tools that you need, having that supportive community, understanding that you don't have to do this alone. And so those are the messages that we push with Heal House, is that you can show up just as you are. You don't have to change anything at all. There's not some preconceived notion of what healness should be, what wellness should be, because there's no prescription for everyone to have the same prescription. It's a very specific journey that you find through self-awareness.
Thank you.
And Elise, can I just say, Chris, can I just say, just to support that, I'm gonna bet in, because that's what diversity is about, right? That is what being a diverse organization or being a group of diverse friends is all about. It's the difference, and it's the difference that makes you special. And I think mental health is part of that as well. The mental challenge you go through or that you're afflicted by isn't an affliction. It's what makes you who you are. And that makes you unique and have a different perspective and a different voice. And I think it's so important that we need to realize that it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask Elisa one thank you, because now I realize I'm maybe one of the sexiest people on the planet, because I've been vulnerable, girl. I mean, we've been, as Suba and Simon may know, in the workplace. I mean, I can relate to that in the sense, I've held conversations on race and cried. I've got done with those conversations and cried, because I'm like, just the energy release. Even some of our audiences have chatted. We had a poll around the level of comfort from 1 to 5. And some people were saying, I'm at a 5, very comfortable talking about mental health. And they've cried at work, they've been crying in Zoom calls. And so I think there is this new sense of freedom and willingness to go there. But I want to pause on that, because I think about myself. I'm a huge oversharer, and look, I've already listed a couple of boxes that I check. But I think that's not always been easy. And I think about, to your point, the root cause, and Dr. Brittany Linden, you talked about this in terms of the origins around this. I mean, the images, I can't think about movies and shows where we often look at mental health as this scary thing. And I think about The Shining, and I think about the movies like Split, and it comes off as it has to be this extreme. And at least you're talking about the spectrum. And I think about first person, right? Thinking about how we generally speak about ourselves. It wasn't until 5 years ago that I finally was okay with having the weight and saliency of my own mental health, and to actually say, wait, this is depression. No, I'm depressed. I went through a pretty serious health issue, and I have a compromised immune system now, but it was one of those things where in that state, living in South Carolina with my parents, where I didn't have a job and I had all these friends, and I was isolated in a very much similar sense, which is why I think this time is a bit triggering. I started to own that. And it's interesting that I'm very quick to say I'm Black, I'm queer, and I check that box, and we check those boxes on our applications, but we don't really show the breadth of mental health. When you check that box, and it's hidden under disability, right? So I check my disability. I may have a physical disability, but within that, it has the other aspects of that, including learning disabilities, mental health. And so I guess and I'll open it up to anyone, which is to go back to this point of, why is this still a stigma to talk about in the workplace? Why is that stigma still there? And to many of the people that have responded to the poll question, they're at a 5 or a 3 or above in the sense of talking to peers, talking about it. They're at a 2 or a 1 with management and their boss. And I think that's a very interesting thing. And I'll just maybe go back to Simon on that, but I see your hand. Thank you. That'll make it easier too. Dr. Brittany, yeah, why is that still a challenge for us? Because I still hesitate to say I'm depressed.
Right. And so everyone on this panel just brought up an amazing array of why this all synthesizes together, right? And Simon made that comment too around the dominant culture historically has made the prescriptions around what mental health looks like or what mental illness looks like. And Simon, you also just made that comment too, and Elisa, your comment around the root cause, right? You just made that comment around diversity in the workplace is through having a diverse set of people. But I go back to with mental health, it's your lived experience. experience. And so wrapping back to what I do, I work with male, cisgender, masculine presenting veterans who are really stigmatizing of mental health. And the moment that they have to speak with me, they say, I don't want to speak with the shrink, kind of going back to our mental social imaging of what mental health looks like. And I have to lay out the basic fact that every single one of us has mental health. So just as you have a physical health barometer, every single one of us has mental health. And Chris, I love that share, right? That there was a moment that you finally had that recognition of, oops, I'm in a place of depression. And realistically, it's that we all have an ebb and flow to our mental health and mental well-being, and that lived experience we have every single day. And it oscillates throughout the day. It is not one set static point just at the start of your day. And it's really paying attention to those internal signals and cues and how we're interacting that really shifts the picture for us. And I would just say, going back to this workplace stigma experience, Elisa, I love that you really bring us and call upon us to be vulnerable in our workplace experiences and to be vulnerable with each other, because that is the path of healing. I completely agree. But what we counter and face is that historically, people have faced real world consequences and discrimination and loss of employment. Mm-hmm. And so although we're asking ourselves and each other to be more vulnerable, to show up as fully lived, experienced individuals, we also have to make that mental calculation very seriously of, will I have the benefit and privilege of trusting my coworkers, trusting my leadership for me to fully be transparent and vulnerable and not have to be out on the street corner the next moment looking for employment opportunities.
And I think that...
Can I just add a little bit? Sorry, Simon. Go ahead. Do you want to go? I was just going to add to what Dr. Brittany was saying in terms of being vulnerable, and what Elisa was saying, adding to that is, it is easy for us to be vulnerable, and it's okay for us to be vulnerable and have the invitation to be vulnerable when we nurture and foster an environment that is safe. So I think that's the big thing here, is like, I see a lot of agencies or organizations saying that we do create a sense of an environment that is allowing people to be themselves. We create a place of belonging, but there is the secret sauce, or that equation, and when we are working on that, it's a very sensitive thing, and it's a very difficult thing too, is how safe are we creating our spaces for people to be vulnerable and to people to be themselves. When we say bring your authentic self to work, a lot of people are challenged with that. Do I bring half of myself to work? How do I actually bring all of myself to work when I don't feel safe? So the one equation that we need to add to that sensibility of being vulnerable, and not only focus too much on the sense of belonging if it's a DEI practice, is to also allow being safe about the conversations that are taking place in the environment.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all of that. I think there's sort of two other things that we need to, as leaders and as organizations, particularly in our industry, which is incredibly hard on its employees, probably one of the hardest industries for anyone to join because of the speed at which we work, the change at which we accelerate at. And the fact that technology in our industry, we're at the forefront of every single change, and we have to adapt to that to client needs. So I think there's two things that I think we need to be aware of. Language is one, and I think it's a lot of people don't realize that the way we speak, the way we term things, has a huge impact on how safe people feel or how authentic they feel they can be. And I'll use a quick example. This country still refers to mass murderers as being mentally ill. So they hide behind gun violence as being, you must be mentally ill in order to mass shoot, to be responsible for a mass shooting. That's not based in any data that is clear or precise. And so what we're effectively saying in that language at a national level is only crazy people shoot people, right? And it's not the guns, it's crazy people. So then we're sort of allowing as a society to say, if you're crazy or you're mentally ill, that's a bad thing. So we need to rethink how we frame violence. We need to rethink the language we use. And I think that when we go into the workplace, we need to allow people and realize that even if you are suffering from some sort of mental illness, and after all, it shows up in millions of different ways, and no two people are exactly the same. we need to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean you can't be productive. And it may mean that your productivity shows up in a different way. And so we need to be flexible. So I would sort of say the two things are, let's watch our language and let's look at how we can build flexibility into the work practices. And if we can't do that based on the fact that we've all been working remotely for the last 8 months, we're never going to get it right.
Yeah.
That would be my perspective.
No, that's helpful. And I also think too, I mean, I think the one thing that y'all are speaking to, which is also something that I think many have been aware of, is that, you know, the time frame that we're in right now, particularly with the global pandemic, is that it created a sense of oppression that we've all felt. It has been an equalizer in many ways. And it is not to say that you can equate your level of oppression in the sense of self-distancing and social isolation as someone that is dealing with systematic or systemic racism or misogyny or homophobia. But it is to say that we've interjected a level of empathy now in a way, not only in our homes, but in our workplaces that we've never seen before. And I think, you know, Suba, you spoke to this, and there is a sense of now wanting to, we are craving more connection because of the isolation. And Elisa, you spoke about vulnerability, and people are blowing up on this conversation about vulnerability. And I think there's one aspect of it, which is, and I think there's some really interesting points. What is the difference, or what's the line between what I said, which is I'm an oversharer, and vulnerability and oversharing, as well as where are you able to speak freely or have clear boundaries? Like, can you give a little speaking to around those two aspects of?
Yeah, it's like I'm all up in the chat right now too. I'm like, the chat is like on fire. I'm so excited. There's so many amazing points, and some of them are like, you can't even speak truly to like a clear definition, because vulnerability is just the act of being, right? It's technically, there aren't parameters. Like, yes, there's deemed societal professional parameters that we've dictated. There's things that we have created, like these cultural boundaries, right? But then there's like, yes, there's an aspect of that, but then there's mainly a toxic component of that, because really what's happening is that we live in a society where the bigger issue is that vulnerability is seen as weakness, which someone wrote in the chat, right? So we're taught from a very young age that like, we don't talk about what goes on at home. We don't talk about this, right? And also someone had mentioned too, within like on a person to person basis, like individually, it's hard to be vulnerable with yourself. Yeah. It's a bold, brave thing. It's not easy. So it's almost like first getting comfortable with being vulnerable with myself. And then why is it difficult to be vulnerable with myself? Maybe it's because of what my previous environment was, what I was taught, what I saw my parents do, you know, like that's a thing in itself. And then bringing that into the workplace of like, okay, well, whatever's going on at home or even at work, don't bring it to the workplace, because culturally we view vulnerability as a weakness and something we don't allow access. But I'm interested in, you'll never know unless you bring it to the, and I think we even talked about this in one of our sessions with you guys at Vox, was like, so I think someone asked a similar question, but it's like, you can't get to that what if until we allow ourselves there. And every situation that I've been in where I've been holding space, it's like clockwork, where everyone's like, me too, and me too, me too. And it just allows space for people to relate. And in every single situation, I've always experienced respect, care. Like, it's never been something where I felt like it was oversharing or out of line. And my whole thing is like, do you rather risk, you know, everyone's destruction of mental health, and they're not feeling sane, they're not feeling like they have agency to share something that's happening to them? Maybe it's in the workplace that's very difficult. And then the other aspect is, as you saw in here, like people say 1 to 2 management, they don't feel comfortable in bringing that to. Like, that to me is the bigger issue than oversharing. That is a huge issue, because that's where the trickle-down effect happens. That's where the change happens. And often you don't have management or leaders in these spaces where, you know, you're having these difficult conversations, right? So it's kind of like, yes, there's these societal like faux pas and things like that. Okay, well, don't bring that much, you know, but it's kind of like, but everyone's suffering. We know we're all suffering, you know, like on some level in the midst of this. Let me not use the word suffering, but we're struggling, right? On some level, everyone's different. So it's like now it's the big elephant in the room because, like you said, someone's dealing with it on some level.
Yeah, I want to move and pivot the conversation a little bit, and it kind of syncs up in the sense of management, because I saw someone that said deadlines was a buzzword, right? Dr. Brittany Linton, in terms of burnout, can you just speak to that sense of what's been going on, particularly for folks in regards to this time, and how do you deal with burnout? And also, when that burnout happens, I know, for me, I'm lucky enough, I have a therapist, every Monday afternoon, but I know I have colleagues or friends outside that have said, I'm worried about saying I'm going to go see my psychiatrist or psychologist, and because there may be layoffs, or because we're doing more with less, and that fear to go to their management. Can you speak to the burnout, and also how do you appropriately express that and say I need this care?
Thank you for asking me 6 questions and then resynthesizing it back to one.
I'll do that sometimes.
Just want to
burn out.
I do. I'm burnt out broadly. So there's a question that should have appeared for most of you just now, asking you to rate yourself. Where do you place on burnout? And this is something that we actually have clinical research evidence for. And I want you to think about it instead of jumping to a number. Think about it, 5 being that on a daily level you experience burnout in your workplace setting, and 1 is not at all. And 3 will arbitrarily say maybe once or twice a month. So think about that for yourself. Is it a daily level? Is it a weekly, monthly, or not at all? And then answer that question for yourself, because this number matters. And let's chat a little bit about, what does burnout actually mean? I think a lot of us have a felt experience of burnout, but you might not actually have a working definition. And I find that definitions and being able to apply labels makes that experience so much easier for many people. So the idea of burnout is a chronic stress experience in your occupational or workplace setting. That's it. It's very simple. A chronic stress experience, not those momentary projects that we have come up, but that you don't feel like you ever catch your breath when you're in your workplace setting. And it's typically characterized by feelings of depletion and exhaustion, or an increased mental distance from your job, like where you might have found yourself passionate and committed and invested at one point. You don't care, and all you're looking for is Friday to come around all of the time. And a lot of people will actually experience those Sunday scaries in an extreme way, where there's this buildup of anxiety the moment that you know that the Monday is coming, or whatever the start of your work week is for you. And then the last part is that it feels like you yourself have become less competent and confident in your workplace role, where maybe you don't feel like you are as gung-ho as you were before, and that you question yourself more on project deliveries, or maybe that you even feel more disconnected from coworkers. So I want everyone to think about that when you think about your personal experience of burnout. So again, on that 1 to 5 scale, yes. What? 4?
I'm at a 4.
Oh, you're at a 4. Thank you for sharing.
It may be Suba, I'm not going to speak for Suba and Simon, but I think in terms of our roles, we're in an interesting place where we are capitalizing in the energy in the moment, and ushering these conversations, and realizing we also have to take care of ourselves, but we're also doing a lot as facilitators. I love the word that Simon was saying earlier. So I'll just say I'm a 4 at times, and I definitely do my daily practices to bring me down to a 1.
Well, and it's interesting that people oftentimes in very public-facing roles, person-facing roles, especially if you're a manager or you're in a healthcare profession or helping profession, like they notice that number ebbs and flows pretty significantly. And I think that's important to keep in mind too. So I can imagine that if you are as outward-facing as you are, Chris, I can see that happening. But going to the core of this question, right? So that's your standard burnout level. And it wouldn't surprise me if that for many of us, that has probably taken a massive hit in 2020. Simon, to the points that you were making, that we have this overlay of the remote workforce culture because of COVID, in addition to any other emotional experiences and impacts you've had because of your lived experience around your particular identity sets, whether you're employed or not employed, whether you're part of the BIPOC community or not, whether you're part of a legally protected community in the United States for your workforce needs. All of that impacts you. And so, Suba, I love the question. I love the point of reflection you had us all make around environment. And my mother taught me, who's a physician herself, she always taught me that you are only as healthy as the environment that you live in and occupy. And when we go back to the key points Elisa was making around why be vulnerable in the workplace, it's that at the heart of it all, if we do not feel safe, healthy in our environment, we are going to experience burnout. And so if you are looking for that justification around how do you even start to talk about burnout with your employers, with your leadership, with your management, with your own employees, also going back to the trickle down that Elisa was calling upon us to do, right? If you're not able to talk about that you are struggling and that the environment is not conducive to your well-being and success and that the burnout is ratcheting up, you're going to leave your position. You're either going to fail at it, and I don't mean to cause anxiety. You will not fail. You all are amazing, perfect human beings in the best ways that you can be in the moment. But, and you're going to struggle and hit a wall and no longer be the dedicated, invested employee that you hopefully were initially called into the position to do. So it serves our workplace structures to be attentive to burnout, and it serves each one of us to name it when it comes up, but it helps to know to name it and how to name it and how frequently it's happening.
Thank you. And I know I burned you out in all those questions, but you did a superb job of responding to all that. Sue, just would love your points in terms of, I know you really take on a spiritual practice in terms of mindfulness and meditation. How are you seeing those as other ways and means? It's interesting. We oftentimes think of what we need to do to provide support, and we often kind of see the industry trends, and it's like, oh, yoga and go meditate. But how do people find their own practice around things that will make sense to them, and what you've been doing to do that?
Okay, wow, I think I have 1 minute, right, to answer all of that, but I'll do my best. I wanted to say before that, mental health has become a huge, integral part of any DEI movement right now. And if your DEI practice of movement is not incorporating mental health, please do so, because research indicates 4 times ROI for organizations investing in workplace mental health and wellness, such actually increase productivity and improve employee retention. I think I can't stress enough on that. And in terms of, really listening to, I mentioned that earlier, is really listening and unlearning, and also making sure that mental health is more than just mental well-being or wellness or emotional well-being. We hear all of those terminologies. It's more than just meditation or breathing. Of course, it's huge. It starts there. I am a huge believer in meditation, and I remind myself to do deep breathing instead of the shallow breathing that most people do. Is to also introduce things that can actually help people think that mental health is beyond just meditation. So it's about the body, it's about the mind, it's also about the soul. So think about, some programs that you guys can come up with that actually talks about how do you actually strengthen your immune system, because all of it is related eventually to your mind. How about giving tips to your employees about how do you feng shui your home to create a safe space, a peaceful space? All of that, once again, goes back to affecting the mind. How about exercising in the power of forgiveness during this isolation time, and really being kind to ourselves and practicing compassion goes back to the mental well-being of our mind. It all goes back. How about talking about forest bathing, as simple as, a Japanese outdoor activity goes back to mental health. So it all comes down to really broadening and expanding the knowledge about what is mental health and opening the dimensions of mental health, that it's more than just the obvious reason, but also helping your employees take on visions and layers and help actually kind of peel the onion along with them and understand what mental health is all about, and then introduce it in kind of like the day-to-day things that are happening in the agency or organization. Thank you for that.
Simon, you've mentioned new work language. I know some of y'all have brought it up as well. Elisa, I know you've been meditating on wellness versus healing, and why is that, and what are your thoughts around that?
Yes, of course. So I've been having a problem lately with the word wellness. It's interesting. It is very much an industry. And I mean, even during this time, during COVID and with all the racial injustices happening, there's just a big conversation in the wellness industry in general of like, who is this for? Who is it accessible to? What is the agenda, right? And it's just been, because wellness resonates so much with an industry right now, it's $1 trillion market. Like, what are you doing to also just access different people, different price points? Like, it's very important to really consider those things. And how can you integrate that into your business model? So I've been thinking a lot about, I mean, we use the word healing, like our tagline is healing is a lifestyle. Because it very much is. I often say that you have to integrate some aspect of healing in your day-to-day on some level. It's like brushing your teeth. It should be like that. It should be something that's seen as normalized and consistent.
Or washing your hands, right?
Wash your hands, right? Like, I'm doing something today for my body, mind, and spirit. And so, yes, like I really like the word healing a lot better than wellness, because it feels like I can grasp that, and it feels like it's personally my own, and it hasn't been co-opted the way it has in many ways. And so, yeah, I love the idea of really claiming our individual and collective healing, because I can tailor it for me. I can tune into my own self-awareness and understand what do I need. And just like Subi had spoken about, I preach all the time, holistic health and wellness, or health and healing is it's integrated, and it's that, just that, holistic. It's body, mind, spirit, soul. You have an energetic body, you have a physical body, you have a mental body. So you can't talk about mental health without, well, any of it. You can't even talk about physical health individually. They all come together to contribute to how you feel in its entirety. So it is so important for people to start defining healing as, like, you know, all these things are integrated, because if one's out of balance, you know, the other one's going to feel the repercussion. And it's also about not having the pressure on yourself, not feeling like I have to set these unrealistic parameters of when I'm going to accomplish this and do this, and when all this going to come together, and I'm going to meditate for an hour a day. And like, no, it's finding what's feasible for you, what works for you, and not judging yourself, and being kind to yourself, and somehow meeting some aspect of all of them at a pace that works for you.
I appreciate that. So, I mean, I want to pick up on something that Elisa said on wellness being co-opted and sometimes in a performative way. And I think about oftentimes social media, and I think about one, you know, recently when the racial injustices were going on, there was that Blackout Tuesday. I know for me it was triggering, because I got on my social media and I was like, what are all these blacks, what's going on? And then being like, oh, you're trying to support the Black community. Okay. And in some ways it feels performative. But I also remember a time, you know, when sadly, you know, folks like Anthony Bourdain or was passed away, and there was that sense of, I'm just going to post on my Instagram the suicide hotline. Mm-hmm. And I just would want you to speak to maybe like what should people be really doing to sustain this and not make it be a moment, but a movement? And what should we be thinking about when we're doing things that feel more authentic than performative?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll try and do it justice. It actually goes with there's somebody who posted finding therapy and help is not easy in the comment section. So I think that sort of speaks to what you're asking as well. You know, I think you know, it frustrates me when I see moments in time and people sort of taking the opportunity to jump on the bandwagon and feel like, oh, well, I can pat myself on the back. I can say I'm a good corporate citizen, or I'm a good human being because, you know, I put a black square on my social media, or, you know, I did hashtag Black Lives Matter. But if you're not actually like living those values every day and not standing up for those values, then it's just a moment in time, and you're really not helping fix the problem. And I think the same thing can be said when it comes to mental health awareness and dealing with how do you change the stigma around it. And to your question, I think, and to the person that put in the comments, you know, I think that's where it's behooving on people that are in positions of power to start the conversation and to be vulnerable. And I think it was Suba that said, be vulnerable, right? Because if we provide a space where we give license to people to say it's okay to talk about your challenges because I'm going to tell you about mine. Then you suddenly, it's not a moment, it's a meaningful solution, right? And so I do think that what we need to do in organizations is, we've done a lot of work around psychological safety right now. And so there's a lot of talk in organizations around, well, how do we create a space and how do we start to break down the systemic issues that have led us to where we are today? And there's a thing out there called psychological safety, and I really encourage everyone to talk to their agencies about what are you doing to provide a safe space psychologically for employees, whether they be Black, brown, Asian, gay, straight, disabled, suffer from mental health. How are you creating an environment where being able to be open and talk about that doesn't come with recrimination or doesn't come with the fear of people passing judgment on you? And I think, the important thing there is, and I did something with Made of Millions a couple of months ago. It feels like a couple of months ago. And I was actually doing some recordings around how organizations can start to look at mental health and what leaders need to do in organizations. And one of the things that I really, that I thought was really important was, the safest place for you to start to talk about your challenges is with your friends and family. And so, work is often the toughest place, right? And so find that one person, just the one person that you can be open and vulnerable with. And you'll find that when you've done that and when you've started to talk to them, and if they're a really good friend or if they're a family member, they're going to love you no matter what is perceived as being wrong with you. When you open that dialogue, you will find that you will suddenly realize that it's not as oppressive as you think it is. And what you'll be really surprised with, and I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but what you'll be really surprised is you'll be really surprised with how many people are actually going through what you're going through, right?
Yeah.
And that's the surprising thing. You sit there and you think, holy crap, like, there are, 60 other people in my agency who are all feeling the same way I'm feeling. And so isn't that empowering to go, well, I'm not alone and I've got somebody else I can talk to when I'm feeling that way. And I sort of will close with, I think, though, it's up to leaders. And I think we need to hold leaders accountable for the fact that we don't live in 1950, we don't live in 1960, we live in 2020. And it's time, if you're going to be a good leader, it's time for you to realize that comes with the responsibility of creating a psychologically safe place for everyone in your organization. And if you can't do that, it's time for you to go find another job.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And it's not even just leaders. I think it's everyone in terms of colleagues and even in your own family spaces. I was thinking about this for myself when I was saying earlier, like I was finally owning my own mental health issues and challenges. One of the things that I've been grateful for, I have a niece that has deals with mental health issues as well. And I have, close friends now that have allowed me to bump and collide with their feelings, their situations in ways that I did a lot with my other identities. And I think I appreciate what you were saying with that one person, because I think that physics of inclusion, that sense of belonging that we are trying to create and cultivate, it is about putting yourself in places of where you commute, what are you consuming, what are you reading, who are you talking to, is allowing you to be more culturally fluent and remove the stigmas and to some degrees owning more of like, okay, there is some similarities around that. And I think that's really, really key. And I think that's for everyone. I think it's interesting because I think about the amount of anti-racism resources and in some degrees people saying go unlearn. And for me, I had to go unlearn myself for mental health and really go to somebody, yes, we do this work in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, but we can't understand every identity. We're not experts, right? And the ability is to continue to move in different spaces and with different folks to really get us to do that better.
And by the way, I would just say it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to say I don't know.
Yes.
It's okay to say, can you leave that with me because I need to educate myself, or help me understand because I want to understand. It's okay to be fallible and to say, I'm not perfect. Like, when the George Floyd situation happened, and I think I'm a fairly woke person, right? And I realized that even in my life, I had so much more learning to do. And it was up to me to learn that. Like, if I really wanted to be a strong ally, I needed to actually understand what was at the root of the problem. And I realized I didn't really fully understand that. And I think it's the same things with mental health. It's like, if you want to be an ally, if you want to be a really good friend, if you want to be a supporter, like, educate yourself. It isn't just enough to go, oh, okay, I'm sorry you're going through that.
Yeah. I want to go back to one question about finding therapy and help is not easy. And Dr. Brittany Linden, we're in this political climate right now. I think that's the other thing about 2020. It just keeps going. so many things in terms of the burnout. But what I would like for you to maybe speak to is, as we think about, politics, and really, I think I've been thinking a lot about the politics of care. What does sustainable access or like mental health equity mean today? Like, what does that look like, especially when someone's saying it's not easy to find help? And I know that because I think in some workplaces, you may only have your, employee, the EPA employee program, assistance program, and they may only offer you three or five free sessions, right? So what does equitable access for the mental health area look like now? Or should? And I won't give you 3 minutes. But I know there's a lot to unpack there.
Excellent.
But just maybe the theme about what does equitable access look like today?
Absolutely. And it is such an important topic. And I'm really glad that we are going back to that comment made, because so many people don't have good access to therapeutic services. And I think it's also important to think about, when you reflect upon who are your supportive allies for your mental well-being, for your resiliency bolstering, who are the people within your various circles that help bring you up and buoy you when you are struggling? Keeping in mind, so many of us are feeling depleted in 2020. So our ability to show up for ourselves, much less showing up for each other, has really taken a hit this year, I think, for many individuals. And I saw that one of the most recent comments was, how do you protect your own energies, especially if you are part of a marginalized identity and community set? With all of that in mind, what I am really encouraged by in this era of remote experience for all of us is that it's allowed greater access to therapeutic services at that remote level through texting, through video messaging, in ways that we've never seen before. I oftentimes joke that for my field, in particular for telemental health, there are very few providers out there that were really willing to jump on the telemental health bandwagon, and now they've been forced to. And I'm so glad that my field, as a field of mental health providers, has been forced to become late stage adopters. And in a prior career version of myself, I actually used to work in the tech and industry space, and I've become very acquainted with what is it like for technological opportunities of connection and support. So when you are looking for sustainable avenues for your mental health well-being, I think it's first evaluating who are the people within your inner communities and circles that you can at least have good active listening encounters with. People that at least are absorbing what you're saying with full attention and full hearts, and validating or helping provide gentle feedback or advice in the ways that are meaningful for you. And identifying those individuals in your various circles that can provide that for you in a trusted space, particularly in your workspace setting. I always say you need to have a workplace yardstick and someone that you trust, that you can go to for radical candor and feedback, psychological safety, and the ability to get more information.
Someone chatted a work family, and I like that. I mean, exactly. Think about that, right?
Exactly. We need to have those work
family, work family. Yeah.
I have very many workplace spouses. They know who they are. I have lots of workplace spouses. We get into occasional spousal fights. That's okay. But, you need to have that connection. We make up. But then on top of that, when you are looking for therapeutic services, do some of the research right now. There are a number of free texting therapeutic services, especially for crisis needs. If you do find yourself in crisis, do that sooner rather than later. And that there are more peer support communities that are popping up, that those are completely free as well. But If you have found yourself unable to access therapeutic services, what's nice is that you can be in one part of your state and now access a provider all the way on the other side of the state for mental health care who might be able to be more specially aligned with you and your unique experience. So let's say that you are someone with a different language speaking access need other than English, and you might be more communicative of your mental struggles and mental health well-being in Spanish, for example, and there's not an immediate provider in your area, you can now find them elsewhere in the state. And I'm really excited about that with telemental health access.
Yeah, and I think that's where we wanted to partner with Healhouse and Elisa in the sense that we knew that we were offering, various benefits for our employees, but we also knew that we needed to ensure that there were also safe break spaces for them in terms of practitioners, and in terms of those that have the understanding and awareness and cultural competency to deal with very specific identities. And Dr. Brittany Linton, you even speak to this too about, 4%, I believe was the stat of practitioners of color in this space. And
I can share that really quick. There, amongst all psychologists in the United States, only 4% of them are Black American psychologists or Black identifying psychologists.
Yeah, that's. And I was going to say crazy. And that's one of the things that I've been doing on myself and calling myself out is actually removing that. I think about so many times in the workplace, we say that the deadline's crazy. And there are folks that get triggered by that. They say, no, it's not crazy. The work is challenging, where you're struggling with it. And it's going back to that point of the new work language. So we're now at Q&A time with the audience, and hopefully I have a couple of questions. One was, what are the free support groups? Do you mean on Facebook or elsewhere? I think that was a follow-up question.
Can I actually just chime in on that question? We also at Healhouse, we have a therapy fund that we just started recently for BIPOC people. So you can actually apply for our fund. It's free talk therapy with our Healhouse therapist. You get 8 free sessions because I often feel like with free therapy that's set up, it's like one session, but you actually get a span of time to deep dive. So you can check that out. That is a resource at healhouse.com. Donations, you can apply and you can also donate to the fund.
Another question is, the industry that we're in has often glorified some of the unhealthiest traits of madmen as being necessary to the creative process. How do we become thought leaders in debunking these stereotypes? Who wants to take that?
I mean, first of all, we change what our leadership looks like. So let's not be as white and as male-driven as an industry that we still are. We only have, the industry only is made up of 5.8% Black African American, 8.1% Latin or Hispanic, Latinx or Hispanic, and 9.5% Asian, according to a study that we did less than a month ago across the industry. So I think one of the first things we do is change what our leaders look like, change what the organization looks like, have more voices in positions of authority and positions where you can actually change the dynamics of the organization. And then I would sort of say, and I sound like I'm being very decisive here, but call it out. Like if you see it, call it out and say, why are you saying that? Like, why are you still living in this glorified world where the decisions are made by middle-aged white man? We don't live in that world anymore. Our customers don't look like that. We're not marketing to that population. So I just get frustrated with this because I hear what you're saying, Sakil, because I think to myself, like, let's just call it out. It's bullshit. Let's just call it for what it is and say stop. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think I remember this week alone, wasn't there an announcement that they're streaming Mad Men again? I'm like, are we gonna go back to that era?
Right. Yeah, right. And there are
watch all that again.
And there are many episodes in that show that are very politically incorrect. And so if we're going to ban, other shows like the Brady Bunch and the Beverly Hillbillies, then I think Mad Men is one of those that should never be shown again.
Yeah.
So
another question. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to echo what Simon was saying and probably just add a little bit to what he was saying to that question is I think one big thing that we probably need to realize is it's time for us to challenge our leaders and really, really question that. I'm going to use VMLY&R as an example. We just recently created a transformation team that's led by our Chief Integration Officer. And the transformation team is basically looking at all the avenues of how do we actually go through this transformation from all disciplines of the organization, not just DEI, but all the other disciplines of the organization. And that's something that we're taking very, very heavily, and we're putting a lot of focus on it, giving ourselves, deadlines like in 30 days, what is the outcome? In 60 days, what is the outcome? 90, and so on and so forth. And that is going to be challenging for a lot of current folks that are not part of the transformation plan, that somewhat is part of an older system. So we first have to acknowledge that there is an issue, and we have to include our leaders and make them realize that there is an issue and that you need to help us actually create this transformation together and invite them into the sandbox together. The other thing also I challenge is, and I've said this before, there's always this notion of the table is too small and that we don't have enough space. My challenge to everybody is, let's buy a new table. And let's buy a larger table, and let's buy extra chairs that actually can accommodate more people. Because often I hear the table is too small, and I can't buy that. And I really cannot, we can't conform to those anymore. We do need to get rid of that table and buy a new table that's larger.
Yeah, and let's make sure that the chairs are designed for people of all different heights with all different disabilities.
Thank you.
Not just chairs designed for one type of person. I love that. It's great too.
Vox Media, we've been doing that as well. And on our editorial side, we recently have been doing a reevaluation of just the creative process in terms of our writing. Is the identity relevant to the story? Why are we capitalized? Are we going to capitalize the being Black? Yeah. Yes. Are we going to add content warnings to our online post where there's video that's traumatic? And also that secondary trauma, right, of overwatching that. So we're thinking about those kind of style. We're thinking about the audience experience as well. And what I will say is it's really important to look at this at all aspects and challenge everything, right? Because what we've seen, at least we know for the last 10 years, whatever we've been doing hasn't worked because we're still having these conversations, right? Even in the regards to George Floyd was not a new video. 2017, we saw this in many other instances. I have another question, which was, I place great value on the continuity of care within the same provider. Is that typically available through digital EVP programs?
Is that for, I can jump in and answer that really quickly. I think it's valuable to be a critical consumer of your own health care, and as much burden that we do place on ourselves to be advocates in our own care, I do encourage you to do that. So if it is important for you to have a continuity of a provider, then identify the programs that provide that for you. Other people are actually okay to just get the support and help in the moment, and they don't really care as much who is the one providing it. Again, it goes back to each of our own personal preferences and our own needs for healing. So if that is a critical need for you, just make sure that you do some of the research on the forefront to get that understanding as to whether that's provided or not.
Another question is, in some countries like Belarus, it's scary to fight for the human rights, but people should do it otherwise. They stay under a dictatorship for generations. How such people can support their mental health? So how can these people help support those individuals' mental health?
This is, this makes my heart break questions that I see that like this, because, we're this has been going on for generations, but I feel like in 2020, we're living in a world where the difference is getting wider and the gap's getting wider between people's beliefs. I think it takes a huge amount of courage, and I can't pronounce your name, so I apologize for that. But, it's a huge amount of courage to stand up in a country. We're lucky in this country because, yes, we have a divided government, but we don't live under a dictatorship. We don't live under the fear of being killed because we're gay or because we're Black, or we do live in a country where we're killed because we're Black, but we don't live in a country where, where it's so extreme. And I think, the advice I would be is, rally around your support group, rally around your family and friends, and reach out to those people that you think are being, unfairly treated, and offer that support. And I know it can be challenging and tough, and it takes a lot of strength to do that. But that would be the advice that I would give is, be that kind heart and be the open mind to actually listen to the person and what they're going through.
Thank you. Well, we don't have any more questions left, and we do have about 2 minutes to spare, but I would like for one, just last go around question for the group, and I'll just let each one of y'all be able to respond to this going forward. But I just want to go back to this point of sustainability and longevity, and particularly, I appreciate and value that we have these recognition days and oftentimes these heritage days, but after the 9th, and after the weekend and after the news cycle, for each of y'all, how can we continue this conversation? How do we take this current gathering that we have here, and how do we continue this conversation and sustain the discussion on mental health? Whoever wants to start. Elisa. Oh.
I'm like, can you actually repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. How do we sustain this conversation beyond today's gathering? And how do we make sure that mental health is sustainable going forward, and it's just not a news cycle or just a heritage or recognition day?
I mean, I guess I will revisit the vulnerability topic and just courage to stand in your truth and who you are and what you need to have healthy mental health for yourself, is to really start to take some time to tap into what that looks like for you. If you haven't gotten help, to be able to identify what that looks like, even if it's just asking someone or sharing that experience with someone, if you don't even know, to say, I don't even know what to do, to seek help, to connect with people that support you, that are open and that can hold space for you in a nourishing way. And to continue that community and to have the bravery to bring these conversations into difficult circumstances. It's the only way that radical change happens in anything, right? Is to take a radical act to change it, to shift it, to have the courage. I guess that would be the things that I would say, and to focus on your journey, tune out everything that's happening at times. I'd say most of the time. Turn it on every once in a while to just understand. But right now specifically, because there's a lot going on, and there's the opportunity for us to be influenced by so much and a lot that's very hard for our mental health right now. Just take time for yourself and just tunnel vision, focus on what you need to do for yourself, and share that information with others.
Thank you. Suba, how do we sustain this?
I was just going to quickly say that, for an organization, is to recognize and think of creative ways of how you can actually find the intersectional approach to recognizing mental health in for example, through the ERGs, or you don't have to wait for Mental Health Day to actually talk about mental health. It should be talked about throughout the whole year. It should be something that is embedded in your DNA, and something that talks about through the ERGs, through subject matters, or creating safe spaces conversation. It should be an ongoing thing, and it shouldn't be something that you wait for a special day. Intersectionality is something that is so important, finding that intersection between programs, and actually just finding that, almost closing that gap from it.
Yeah. Simon, how do we sustain this conversation?
Well, Elise and Suba have sort of covered everything. I mean, I think the thing is that, to Suba's point, is Mental Health Awareness Day is every single day. And so, don't think of it as a moment in time. Like Elisa said, I think, bravery, don't be afraid to speak up. Hold your leadership accountable in the workplace. So don't settle for no, don't settle for I don't want to have the conversation. Like out of the most uncomfortable conversations comes change. And I think those uncomfortable conversations being had every day is going to bring about change. So, you're not alone. Just realize that you're not alone. And every single day you may be surprised by, speaking your truth. You may actually be surprised with the people that will actually rally around you. Thank you.
And Dr. Brittany Linton.
I think that each person today, you most likely, if you were watching this amazing panel, I'm so blessed to be part of this panel today, that there was something that spoke to you while you were listening to all of us talk for the last 90 minutes. There was some aha moment, and make sure you capture that aha moment for yourself and where it resonated and why, and act upon that. Because it might have been Elisa talking about the power of vulnerability. It might have been Simon's attention to our language use, or Suba's acts around how do we incorporate daily healing in every moment of our lives. And speak to that, honor it, and act upon it, even in a 5% margin. I oftentimes give people the challenge, if you were to improve things by 5% today, what would that look like for yourself? You don't need to change the world today. I don't expect that of you. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. But how are you going to make that 5% change for yourself? And then asking ourselves and each other, what is your load today? And how heavy or light is it? But just asking, how is the load today, and checking in with yourselves, and not just allowing it to be a passive, how are you doing? Yeah. Ask how the load is really. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. I know I could keep talking with y'all forever, and I hope we continue to connect and keep this going, because I think many people benefit from this. I really want to thank all the audience and attendees for attending today's panel discussion. I also really want to thank Berlin Cameron, Made of Millions, and Wethos for really providing the space and opportunity for this necessary and critical conversation to happen. And I hope y'all were able to find some way to connect to your own mental health and well-being during this time, and continue to keep going, keep moving, and be well. Take care, everyone.